Here's a number worth knowing: $4,700 a month. According to the latest Census Bureau data, that's the median household income for Americans 65 and older. Cross $5,000 in a household is technically above the statistical midpoint for this age group in the United States. That sounds like it should come with a sense of relief, but here's what the research consistently shows. Being above the statistical median and actually experiencing financial security in retirement turn out to be two very different outcomes. And the gap between them is where this educational breakdown gets genuinely interesting. Today, we're walking through what $5,000 a month actually looks like in retirement, and what the data shows about why two households with identical incomes can experience retirement very differently. Let's start with the source, because where this figure comes from matters more than most discussions acknowledge. The Census Bureau reports that households headed by someone 65 or older recorded a median household income of $56,680 in 2024. Divided across 12 months, that's approximately $4,723 before taxes. The key term here is median, not average. That distinction carries significant weight in how this data should be interpreted. A median represents the household sitting exactly at the statistical midpoint. Half of all households in this age group fall above that figure. Half fall below. An average, by contrast, is sensitive to extreme values at the top of the distribution. A relatively small number of very high-income households can pull an average figure dramatically upward, making it far less representative of typical outcomes. To illustrate, consider a hypothetical group of 10 retired households, 9 recording incomes between $40,000 and $60,000 annually, and 1 household recording $2 million from asset liquidation. The average across this group would reflect the outlier far more than it reflects the 9. The median, by design, identifies the middle point, entirely unaffected by how extreme any single data point happens to be. This is precisely why retirement income research tends to favor median figures when characterizing typical household experiences. One additional context note worth understanding: this census figure covers all households headed by someone 65 or older, not exclusively households where all income comes from retirement sources. Some households in this cohort include a spouse with continued employment, part-time earned income, rental income, or consulting arrangements. That breadth is part of the picture, not a limitation of the statistic. Understanding how households actually assemble this level of income provides more useful context than the headline figure alone. The Social Security Administration reports that the estimated average monthly benefit for an individual retired worker sits at approximately $2,710 as of early 2026. Measured against the $4,700 median household benchmark, the gap is clear. A single retiree drawing only an average Social Security benefit falls well below that figure without additional income sources. Reaching $5,000 typically involves combining multiple streams. Financial planning research identifies several common combinations. One documented pattern involves Social Security as a base, $2,100 or more monthly, supplemented by a defined benefit pension, $1,400 or more, and augmented by withdrawals from tax-advantaged retirement accounts such as a 401k or IRA, $1,500 or more. This combination, historically associated with public sector employment and older private sector career paths, has become less common as defined benefit pensions have declined in the private sector over recent decades. A second observed pattern involves married households where both spouses draw independent Social Security benefits, combining to produce $3,600 to $4,000 or more monthly between them, with a smaller supplemental draw from accumulated savings. This path requires no pension and relies on the multiplier effect of two benefit streams working together. A third pattern involves heavier reliance on personal retirement account withdrawals, sometimes $2,500 or more monthly, to bridge the gap between a single Social Security benefit and a livable income level. Research on this approach notes that income stability in this model is more sensitive to investment portfolio performance and withdrawal sequencing than in the first two patterns. 3 structurally different approaches, all capable of producing a similar gross monthly figure, all technically placing a household above the national median. Quick pause. If this kind of data-driven retirement planning breakdown is useful to you, subscribe. Every week, this channel covers the financial literacy concepts behind retirement decisions that affect long-term outcomes. Now, let's look at what the research shows about two households with identical gross incomes and how differently their experiences can unfold. To illustrate the limits of income as a standalone metric, consider two hypothetical retired households, both receiving exactly $5,000 per month. Household 1 owns their residence outright with no remaining mortgage obligation and is located in a lower cost of living region where property taxes and insurance combined represent a modest monthly expense. This household carries no significant consumer debt. Their $5,000 consists primarily of Social Security and a pension, two guaranteed income streams that arrive on a predictable schedule independent of market conditions. For this household, financial planning research would characterize $5,000 as genuinely comfortable. Fixed obligations represent a small fraction of total income, leaving meaningful discretionary capacity. Household 2 receives the same $5,000 monthly. Gross income is identical. However, this household rents in a higher-cost metropolitan area, with housing costs alone representing approximately $2,000 per month before any other expense is considered. Remaining consumer debt obligations from the working years continue to require monthly payments. A larger share of income originates from investment account withdrawals rather than guaranteed sources, introducing more sensitivity to market conditions. For this household, the same $5,000 produces a materially different experience. A significant share is pre-allocated to fixed obligations before discretionary spending begins. Same gross income, same statistical position above the national median. Meaningfully different financial realities. This is the central finding in retirement income research that most headline statistics don't capture. Gross income does not determine retirement comfort. The ratio of gross income to fixed expenses does. Retirement income research consistently identifies several categories that reduce the portion of gross income that is actually available for discretionary use. Housing costs represent the single largest variable for most households, and also the category with the widest range across individuals. A mortgage-free retiree in a modest region may allocate a few $100s monthly to property taxes and insurance combined. A retiree renting in a higher-cost urban area may allocate $2,000 or more to housing before any other expense is considered. The spread between these two scenarios can exceed the size of most monthly retirement account withdrawals. Healthcare premiums and out-of-pocket costs apply broadly across this age group. Medicare Part B premiums are typically deducted directly from Social Security payments, meaning the deposited benefit amount is already reduced from the gross figure before it reaches a checking account. Tax obligations vary based on income composition. Distributions from traditional 401k accounts and pension income are generally taxable as ordinary income at the federal level. Depending on total household income, a portion of Social Security benefits may also become subject to federal tax. Households with higher proportions of retirement account withdrawals in their income mix tend to face greater tax exposure than households with income weighted toward Social Security. Transportation and vehicle-related costs, including insurance, maintenance, and financing obligations, tend to be relatively consistent in dollar terms across income levels, which means they represent a proportionally larger share of a tighter budget than a more comfortable one. Consumer debt obligations entering retirement, including vehicle financing and revolving credit balances, effectively pre-commit a share of each monthly check before any expense is paid. Retirement financial planning literature consistently identifies debt elimination prior to retirement as one of the most high-impact preparatory steps available. Financial support extended to adult children or other family members represents a category that retirement budget research notes is frequently underestimated or entirely absent from pre-retirement financial projections, yet affects a meaningful share of older households. This category quietly consumes real income that would otherwise appear as discretionary capacity on a spreadsheet. When these categories are applied to a $5,000 gross monthly income, the portion remaining for discretionary use varies dramatically based on individual circumstances. The gap between those two hypothetical households described earlier isn't random. And financial planning research doesn't attribute it primarily to income level during the working years. It traces consistently to structural decisions made well before retirement begins. Studies on retirement preparedness repeatedly find that households entering retirement without mortgage debt on their primary residence experience meaningfully lower fixed expense ratios, freeing a larger share of each month's income for discretionary purposes, regardless of the gross figure. Research on geographic retirement planning shows that households that evaluate cost of living conditions as part of their retirement location decisions, including property taxes, healthcare costs, and general price levels, tend to report higher satisfaction levels relative to their income than comparable households in higher cost regions. And retirement planning literature consistently documents that households carrying consumer debt into retirement experience greater financial stress at equivalent income levels than those who do not because they earn less, but because a fixed share of every check is pre-allocated before discretionary needs are even addressed. These patterns aren't about one household making better choices in some abstract sense. They reflect which financial groundwork gets laid during the working years before retirement income ever becomes the primary financial variable. So, does $5,000 a month represent a successful retirement? Based on publicly available data, it places a household above the statistical median for its age group. That much is simply arithmetic. But retirement financial research is consistent on this point. Comfort, stability, and financial peace of mind in retirement have never been primarily a function of gross income alone. They are a function of how much of that income remains after fixed obligations have been met. The most consequential retirement income figure, according to the research, is not the amount arriving each month. It is the amount remaining after housing, healthcare, taxes, and debt have each taken their share. Because that remaining figure is the one that determines whether a retirement is experienced as comfortable or as a recurring monthly calculation.